God moves throughout the week. I was sitting up last night, putting the final touches on the sermon, and I was sitting there thinking, I was like, this is really short, right? And then Rich, had a message that God wanted to share this morning, and so it's just amazing how God does some of those things. And sometimes that worship is just so powerful. Sometimes I give it up again. I just wanted to ask you a question this week, and it's a question that I posted. Anybody on Facebook? If you're following us on Facebook, where you at? Right. And so I posed this question: if you had one question to ask God, and He would answer it, what would it be? And it's so I just want you to kind of think about it for a second. What would your question be? And I put it on Facebook and got some responses, and I also usually do that kind of stuff on Yahoo Answers because you get some eccentric answers. And so I just wanted to read some of the answers to you. Here's one. I'd ask why Cavs fans are so obnoxious. That was somebody's question. I'd probably ask, so what's up with dinosaurs? Why the drive? Why the shot? Why Cleveland? That was one. I like this one. Can I have my hair back now? And then someone wrote, when are you coming back? Are things going according to plan? Can I have my job back? Why is there so much evil if you're so good? Why are there so many wars? And I just, there's a lot of these. There's a lot of answers, or a lot of questions, excuse me. And you can really feel where that person's at, kind of by their questions. And some of the questions are kind of have a wrong theology to them, but some are very legitimate questions. And I just kind of pondered on that question, because I really didn't know the answer myself. Well, if I had one question, what would I ask? And then this one guy wrote a question that really hit the mark, and he said, there's one question that stands above all others. This is what he wrote. And that is, what is it that you want of me? And that question, I was like, if I sat down and if I really pondered, the one question that I would ask him, that would have to be it. Because sometimes we want to ask all the whys. Why is this happening? Why is that going on? Or the hows? How did you do this? Those questions, while they'd be nice to know, they don't really affect my future, right? They don't affect the way that I'm living. And so the question that I think on some level we all want to ask is what do you want from me? What do you want me to do? Right? What is your will and plan for my life? And that's the question that I wanted to ask. And it's actually the same question the Romans, 2,000 years ago, the Roman church was wondering. And there was, they weren't really sure what God wanted them to do. And Paul wrote to them in Romans chapter 12. He says, therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. And here, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then, only then will you be able to test and improve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. And so Paul's saying, listen, God has a plan for you, right? And sometimes it's hard to discern, but your issue, the reason you can't figure it out is conformity. We're trying to, and you'll know this, to conform to this world. But can you feel that? Can you feel the pressure in your workplace, at home, to just be like the rest of the world? We talked last week about Nicodemus, right? And how, he listened to the world. He conformed to the world and said, I'm going to sell out to the world and do everything that the world wants me to do so that I can be happy. And what? He ended up alone, right? Because he conformed. And Do you remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? We talked about them a couple months ago. There was a law that was in place that they had to pray, or they had to worship to the king whenever this bell was sound. They had to conform. And what they do, they said, there's no way. And so they were thrown into the furnace, right? Or when we talk about Elijah and Ahab, and Ahab was going around killing all the prophets of the Lord, all the prophets, and they were saying, listen, you have to live for our idols or else you're going to die, right? And there was one prophet that stood among them all and said, there's no way, I'm not conforming. And even when Jesus was walking the earth, right, he had all his disciples with him, and they were really raising a ruckus in the community, and they were not following the status quo, and so they were persecuted because they wouldn't conform to the way that the rest of the world, the rest of that nation would. And then, we must have issue in the children's program out there. Unanimous. The rest of the parents. Okay. Malfunction, probably. But listen, so conformity is not yet. I'll wait for you. Come back in. It was just a malfunction. The program works, though. The children's stuff, it's a test. What are those called that they do on the radio? It's a test of the emergency broadcast. Just conformity. And so conformity is not a new thing, right? It's obviously been happening as we read through the Bible. It's basically it's a battle between transforming into what God wants us to be and conforming into what the world wants us to be. And so it is still going on today, right? Have you looked at a high school cafeteria during, not this one, but when there's kids in it, right? Have you seen the people that stand out, the kids that stand out? How often are they alone? They're the ones sitting alone, and so it's this battle to conform, to fit in, to not stand out. And I remember me and Jess always talk about how much we hated middle school, right? You couldn't pay me to go back to middle school. It was a time when everyone started to really group up and make all these cliques. And I remember I switched schools in the 6th grade. So right as all this crazy stuff is happening, kids are changing. They're dressing weird in different groups and all this stuff. And all I wanted was to fit in, right? I remember in 7th grade, I wanted to sit with the cool kids. I didn't want to sit alone, and I wanted to conform. And so I started smoking cigarettes in the 7th grade, just so I could fit in. And I would steal them from my parents so that I could sell them to the kids at school, just so I would feel needed. Just so the other kids would come to me for something, and I feel, man, I'm worth something. Somebody needs me for something, and it felt so great. And it was a battle to conform because I was still going to church every Sunday. And I ended up being two totally different people in two separate worlds. I was one person on Sundays and on Wednesdays, and I was a totally different person at church. And this battle it consumed me to where you had no idea who I really was. And I had no idea who I really was. Because I was trying to conform, but I was also trying to stand out. And it just doesn't work. And that's what the Romans were saying. That was their question. The answer that Paul was giving them was, why can't we figure this thing out? Well, if God's got this awesome plan for us, like he says he does, why can't I figure it out? And that was my question. How can I figure this out? And I just remember one week at the end of my junior year, someone offered me, somebody had canceled on going on a missions trip from church. And so one of the pastors, one of my youth pastors, came up to me and said, Carson, there's this empty spot And he could tell there was things in my life that weren't the way they needed to be, and he said, I'd love to have you go.